the founders of PearMill. We are a performance marketing agency helping companies scale on paid search and paid social. We are a full stack agency. We do media buying, we do creative production, conversion rate optimization, and we have data services like data engineering and attribution modeling and forecasting and so on. We spend usually around double digits millions per month, and we're about to, as you all know, push into a pretty high scale period of the year. And so I've asked Kareem, who's one of my co-founders, to come on this and sort of walk everyone through how we think about the next couple of months in general and what's worked for us in the past. I'll pass it on to Kareem if you want to introduce yourself and we can get started.
Yeah. Everyone, I'm Kareem, one of Nemo's co-founders. On the team, I specifically lead the growth team. This is the team that builds out the strategy for accounts, runs the growth process, and like how do we ideate what initiatives we're going to run, how we prioritize them, actually executes them, and reports on them with our clients. And yeah, this is one of the like more intense periods that we have. It obviously depends on the client, and I'll get into this, but there's just so much potential that gets unlocked with Black Friday. And admittedly, it took us a couple of rounds of Black Friday for us to get to a state where we feel year over year, we're pretty confident in how we could approach it. There's some nuances and some changes, but wanted to share what we know so far about it prior to this Black Friday, and then maybe we'll have another webinar afterwards and be like, was that right? Was that how close? What needs to be different this time around? Because there's always something. But yeah, I think we can. I think we can jump into it. I don't know if we're at the 7-minute mark, but
we're at the 5-minute mark. That's close enough. This is the webinar version of the Broadway rule.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So Black Friday was started in no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to go through the history of Black Friday. Although I did actually look up. I think it has to do with it's the first Friday during the holiday period where you're in the black instead of being in the red, because people are preparing for holiday shopping, which, origins of terms and etymology and all that stuff is interesting. I'll start off by setting some context of why you should do Black Friday and Cyber Monday ads and why you shouldn't. It's not for everyone. I talked about it being a pretty intense period, but there's a reason it is really important for some of our clients and some of our accounts. And there is also another reason that it's not important for a lot of our accounts. So typically for an account that does Black Friday and Cyber Monday ads, their customers are expecting it. They're looking at the product. They're expecting some sort of promotion or some sort of sale. They're in the purchasing habit. Black Friday as a whole period just increases, it prepares for the holiday shopping, but also increases the number of people making first-time purchases, which goes into the second point. It's a really good opportunity for reaching new audiences who have never bought within the category, within your not just your product, but within your product category. I think there was some study on Meta that showed about 23% of purchasers for Black Friday purchased a product category that they've never purchased before, and maybe that over time that goes higher. And the final reason that you should do it is you actually have a strong offer, something that you feel will be compelling, people will be excited to see. We usually shy away, and just as an agency, we usually shy away from doing a lot of promotions throughout the year, a lot of sales. There's a couple of reasons for that. The predominant one on Meta is that you just constantly have to go through ups and downs of resetting your account with learnings, launching new campaigns, going back to your evergreen campaigns and all that. But for Black Friday, if you have a strong offer, people are really expecting it, and you need that offer in order to play during that time period. I'll explain one other dynamic that happens during this period that most people here already know, or likely already know. things get really competitive. Almost every advertiser that has a significant budget is going to be advertising their promotion. They'll be going through either trying to finish their budget at the end of the year or going through the last dumps of inventory. And so what will happen while people increase their spend and competitors increase their spend is CPMs will go up. Your cost for advertising will go up and cost per impression will go up. So in order to offset the increasing cost of advertising during this period, you have to have some offer that increases your conversion rates or people's likelihood to engage with your ad and convert on the page to level out what your eventual CPA will be. So if you don't have those things, then we wouldn't typically suggest actually doing any Black Friday ads. You either can lower your budget during this period, you can pause completely, depends on what your dynamics are and what your spend is. But the reasons I would say not to focus on doing Black Friday and Cyber Monday ads is you're cost sensitive. If you're operating really on the margins and you don't want your cost of advertising to go up even slightly during a period, just not worth playing during this time. It has no relevance to your customers, or it has no relevance to your product. If you're an enterprise product, it's not the most important time of the year. And actually Q4 is some of the worst times of the year, as people are going off and not making any new deals. And then just lightly on the last point here, and this is more of a brand strategy than a promotional strategy. People just don't like to do promotions. And if they feel like they're going to cheapen their brand as a result of doing a promotion, it's also fine to not do the call. And so not every account needs this. And I just wanted to have that disclaimer upfront before going into how to take a relatively healthy approach. Cool. So we have, there we go. There's 3 ways that we look at Black Friday. There's 3 splits for the time period of Black Friday. It's not just like a singular Black Friday period. There's a warm-up that needs to be done, and this is arguably the most important part of any strategy for Black Friday, is the period before you launch your sale. This is a period of 2 to 6 weeks into the areas of focus later. There's Black Friday itself. And here, when I talk about Black Friday, I'm not just talking about the day, but I'm talking about the time period that you have your running. You have your promotional strategy running. So this has to cover a few days before Black Friday, and it has to cover a few days after Black Friday or Cyber Monday period. And then at the end, there is the Black Friday cooldown. This is after you finish your sale, after it's over, how does your account go back into a normal state? And we're going to be taking a look into each of those sections more closely, but just wanted to get that thinking in your heads of it's 3 periods. It's not just one monolith Black Friday period. It's before, during, and after. Cool. So the Black Friday warm-up period. There's a few areas of focus. Like I said, I think this is probably the most important area or area of focus during Black Friday lead up. The different areas, you have to create and populate the audiences that you're going to go after. You want to ensure that there's proper tracking in place and that the data isn't volatile or anything. You want some learnings in place. And this 4th point here, and we'll go through each of these points. This 4th point, you want to start scaling your account relatively early and upload your ads ahead of time. The reason this period is so important is when you make a lot of changes in an account on Meta, resets so much. It resets so many learnings. It introduces volatility in the account. And if you're not warming up the account prior to the actual Black Friday offer period that you have, then you're essentially going to be leaving conversions on the table. You're going to be not getting the best performance that you could be getting from the sale itself. So I'll go through each point here. We'll go through each point. And first I wanted to talk about populating your audiences. So when you're actually at the Black Friday period, you're going to want to have a list of audiences that you can target with confidence and not feel like they're net new audiences or people who haven't had that many touch points with your brand. So I'm going to get into the importance of remarketing in a second, but just to talk about a bit more top of the funnel, we would think about doing your prospecting into two separate buckets. One is prospecting leads. So introducing a top of the funnel campaign. If you have multiple stages in your funnel, introducing a top of the funnel campaign that is specifically optimized to generating leads or maybe even add to carts, anything that allows you to get an email from your potential customer. And what this allows us to do is build up the space for relatively cheap. And then when the promotion happens, you could either email them or retarget them later in the remarketing campaigns. So this is assuming you have a good email nurture cycle and nurture flow, and the conversion from email to nurture is strong. And then we would go into prospecting conversions. Actually, this is the more standard acquisition type campaigns. There's two general audiences that we use here. Broad audiences, so audiences that don't leverage any targeting. It's just targeting one geo, has no restrictions on it. Historically, and this is mentioned in other webinars, but historically, these are the best performing audiences. What you're doing is allowing Facebook free reign to find the cheapest auctions to enter. But this only works if you fed it very good data. And then the other alternative here is use lookalike audiences. Some accounts may use interests, some accounts may use other types of prospecting targeting, but for the most part, we rely on broad. And if not, then we'll rely on some form of lookalike for prospecting. And then we would have the third bucket, or we'll call it remarketing, as everyone calls it. This is the audience that you're trying to grow as much as possible within a reasonable cost prior to getting into the Black Friday period. Usually, remarketing makes up 15, 20, sometimes 25% of our budget during normal periods. For Black Friday, it makes up about 40%. It could be higher depending on the account. So you want to make sure that your remarketing pool is big and strong by spending on the top of the funnel campaigns and making sure that you're splitting it in these ways. So there's the basic website visitors, there's the leads that we talked about. There's the video viewers for people who've watched some of your ads to a certain percentage. So you want people who've watched, we usually say like 50% of the ad. Sometimes we go a bit lower if you're able to get to people who watched at least 25% of your ad. We'll retarget even if they haven't clicked on the ad. And then there's people who've engaged with your Facebook and Instagram page, either organically or through ads. And an engagement in this case is somebody clicked to see the comments, or somebody clicked to view your image that you posted, or also would include an ad click. A note to consider here is that sometimes these audiences, depending on how much you've spent before, are going to be less than 50,000 people. This isn't a precise rule set and a number, but it's a number that we've set ourselves to be the minimum for a remarketing audience. If any of these audiences are less than 50,000, then we'll combine them with another audience to push us over this limit. So let's say video viewers is 20,000 and Facebook, the page engages at 30,000. Rather than have two ad sets that are separately targeting these, we would combine both of them together so that they go of this limit. The reason that's important is the smaller the audience, the more delivery problems you're likely to have, the more expensive it's going to become, your CPM is going to go way up, and the conversion rate isn't going to be worth it, essentially. The only time that we kind of break this rule is when we are looking at leads, and maybe we'll have like 20,000 leads for us to go after, but leads already had a very specific touch point and engagement, or an invested touch point and engagement with your brand. Whereas the others are a bit low and more low investment, visitors, viewers, page engagers, where you need to go over this like 50,000 number for you to offset the expensive cost of targeting a small audience. Cool. Another really important thing to have for Black Friday, prior to the Black Friday promotional period, is you don't want to reach this point without having much conviction in what works in your account and what doesn't. This is important for a lot of accounts, and it's a short period of time, so you shouldn't really be testing so much during Black Friday, unless maybe you're trying to learn about Black Friday specific behaviors that you're then going to implement in the next round, but structuring, in the next year. But structuring those tests is a bit difficult, and it's ultimately a bit more important for this period to just get good performance out of what you have. So ideally, you should have been testing for the year before, testing for the months before. You should know with conviction which creatives work well, which audiences work well, which events you should optimize for, and leverage those for your Black Friday plan, which we'll get to a bit. I cannot emphasize this part enough, ensuring proper tracking. Facebook believes what you tell it. Meta believes what you tell it. And so if you are telling it, if you are sending it certain events and you're telling it to optimize for that event, and that event doesn't match up with your definition of success or a successful event, there's an inherent mismatch between what Facebook thinks and what you think. And as a result, it becomes so much harder to try to optimize Facebook to get to your definition of success. So what we need to ensure is that your tracking is working properly. They will be worth doing an audit, make sure that no events are double firing or undercounting or anything. You're optimizing for the right event that is valuable to you. There are some instances where you have to move a bit higher in the funnel if you don't have enough budget or you don't have enough event signals in a down funnel event for Facebook to learn off of. The general rule of thumb is you want an ad set to get 20 conversion events per week for it to be significant for the ad set. If that's not possible, then you either consolidate your ad sets, and usually we would always recommend consolidating. If it's really hard to consolidate, then we would move one step up in the funnel to an event that is closely correlated with success there. So usually this point is important for every single day, but I would just ensure that this is the case before spending a lot of money in Black Friday and trying to get a lot of new customers and everything. This point is the second most important point, I'd say, after ensuring that tracking is set in place. We would recommend starting to scale early. If you know that you're going to be spending a lot during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, rather than going from X level of spend and then increasing by 200% the next day when you have the sale going on, we would I would recommend gradually getting to that 200%. I think it's it's visualized here in this in this next slide. But the reason being, and we've seen this several times, and this is what I've talked about when we've it's taken us a few reps to get good understanding of how to prepare for Black Friday. We would recommend starting to scale 2 to 6 weeks prior. When we scale overnight, you put the account in a state that it's never been in before, or not even close to what it's been in before. And so everything that it's learned is irrelevant. Everything that it's taken into account is irrelevant. And you start a significant relearning period during Black Friday, which is, not what you want when it's a really important time of year. So what we do, and this, to get into the specifics of it, we'd recommend, if possible, starting 6 weeks before. The earlier the better. If you could start in beginning of October, great. Some accounts maybe they can't afford that, don't have the budget for that, or it doesn't make sense for the account. Could start scaling 2 weeks before. Scale in 20%. You could scale in up to 20% increments 2 times a week. Any more than that, both in terms of frequency and in increments, you risk resetting the learnings. Any less, you may just be way behind your scale goal. You may be way behind where you want to get to when Black Friday, Cyber Monday starts. An important caveat, though, is that this should be dependent on the performance of the account. It should be dependent on just don't scale blindly. Don't scale like 20%. Don't set a rule 20% every 2 days, regardless of performance. This is just like the edge of where you can get to. If your performance isn't looking good, please don't scale. What scaling does when your performance doesn't look good is we think it just sends a signal to Facebook that you are happy with performance when you're increasing budget. So if you're getting to a point where your CPA is bad and you tell Facebook to spend more, Facebook's just going to take that and understand, like, okay, well, they want us to spend more and this is good here. Let's keep doing it. I saw someone raise their hand, but I don't see a question. But I'm happy to answer the question in the meantime.
Yeah, if you have questions, please use the Q&A functionality in the bottom of the screen.
I'll mention just this last point while this question comes in, if the question comes in. But every account, the caveat that I always say with this, and I know it's such an annoying caveat, but it's true, is like this all depends. Every account has some different limits, and within ours, we have that. There's some accounts that we have that we could scale by 40%, and we could push even more. And that's strong, and that's like good for us. Other accounts we have to be a bit more cautious, but the middle ground is a bit more around 20%. So what I would recommend doing is in the periods leading up, see what that edge is for you. If you scale 40% and it doesn't work well, go down to 30%, go down to 20%, or whichever. So the question, how we're defining scaling here and just raising budget. Yep, that's exactly how I'm defining. Just increasing the budget at a campaign level, and as a result, your aggregate spend is increasing as well. A couple of considerations and a couple of things that we've started to realize just like prior to that are important during the warm-up, and this is things that we got with experience. It's worth uploading your ads 3 to 4 days prior to them being prior to the launch of your sale, your promotion, or your Black Friday period. What happens during this time period is so many people are uploading ads. Meta's automated review system then as a result gets a lot of false negatives and rejects a lot of ads. A lot of ads have to go through manual review. The manual review team gets inundated with a lot of ads. So what we'd suggest doing is, if possible, have your ads ready, put them into the account 3 to 4 days before, give it a couple of days for it to approve, and just leave them paused. Then you can schedule it to go live on the day that your promo goes up. We'd also recommend creating more ads than what's actually needed. The reason we say this is there have been a lot of times in the past where we've had conviction on some ads and we launched them, but we missed the mark. The ads aren't being as effective as our evergreen ads typically are. And rather than being reactive and then having to create new ads and then uploading to the account when we lose a few days, we would rather create more. We'd rather just have a surplus, launch with the highest conviction ones. And as we see performance start to come in, we'll pause the poor performing ones and increase the new one. Sorry, we'll pause the poor performance ones and launch the new ones that haven't gotten any spend yet. It's just a faster turnaround. And the other good thing too about Meta this is when you add a new ad to an ad set, it's a lot of ads in a row. When you add a new ad to an ad set, you're resetting the ad set in some way, but you're resetting it less when you just unpause an ad than add a net new ad into it. And one last point here is specifically on remarketing. Every account sort of has an edge of frequency of what's good for remarketing for that account. In some cases, people need to see a remarketing ad 2 times before they're more likely to convert. And then if it goes to 3, then we start to get diminishing returns where we'll just spend more for the extra impression, but it's not more likely to make them result in a conversion. Other accounts, that's 4, other accounts, that's 6. So what we would recommend doing is in the warm-up period, actually learning what that edge of frequency is for you so that you're not leaving any impressions on the table, especially during Black Friday. Cool. Okay, I'll into the Black Friday period itself. If questions come in, if things come up, I'm happy to go back and talk about other points. But let's now talk about the period which you're actually running the promo. The theme of this period, it's kind of funny, you'll see like the points here are a bit less, but the theme of this period is a bit like trust the process, trust what you've done in the warm-up, and like be patient. So you'll see a couple of the areas of focus here is like methodical budget allocation, cautiously optimize. You've done the hard work leading up to this. This period is where you want to see like a bit of the results and not put Meta in a position where it's going to perform poorly. So this is after you have a strong account structure in place, where you're targeting the audiences most likely to convert, which is the audiences that we talked about. You have strong promotional creatives. We'll talk about that. And then operating within the system in a way that is actually benefits the system and allows it to learn and operate well. So this is a base example of a structure of different campaigns that we would have during Friday. Is a little different from one to the other, but at a base level, we see we have 4 campaigns. There's evergreen prospecting and evergreen remarketing. These are your standard campaigns. These are the campaigns that you've had in the account the whole time. They have your evergreen creatives. They are not mentioning the promotion or anything. It's just your normal campaigns. We want to leave these untouched. We don't want to put anything new in them. We don't want to put new assets or put new audiences. Just the same way that they've been operating before. Then we introduced 2 new campaigns here, a sale campaign and for prospecting and a sale campaign for remarketing. And these house all of the promotional assets that you have. this is where you're promoting the Black Friday offer that you have, and whichever end leading to the landing pages. I will say, actually, there's a caveat with the evergreen here. Almost nothing here has changed except for the landing page. If you have a Black Friday specific landing page, then I would update your evergreen assets to lead to that. And it's kind of like a nice surprise. They're just seeing your normal ads that perform the best, and then they get to a landing page where they learn there's an offer. This is a bit different, where you're showing the offer upfront and then leading to a landing page. If possible, to do a redirect with these campaigns, that's a bit even better, so you don't have to manually change the link. But here, the theme of these two is you're taking your best performance and leading them to campaign landing page that is more likely to have them convert because there's a promotion. And this theme with these two is you're taking the promotion, you're highlighting it up front, and then leading them to page. One of the core reasons that we introduce new campaigns rather than updating the evergreen is for learnings and not breaking what you've built over the past months or years. After Black Friday, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the cooldown period, performance is going to look poor, and you'll have to take out all of the sale ads, and you'll have to go back into the evergreen. And this messes a lot with Facebook's learning, and you risk not being able to recover that for weeks and weeks and weeks afterwards, and potentially like several months afterwards, because you've changed your evergreen campaigns into sale campaigns for a period of time, and then you're trying to change them back. So to minimize that, we're introducing 2 new campaigns. I just realized, though, that these budget numbers are inverse. They're opposite, which isn't great. The percentage of your budget, it's all fluid, but a starting point that we typically have, and we'll update this in the handout before we send off to people, is your sale campaign prospecting should have 40% of your budget. Your sale, so it should have this budget. Your sale remarketing should have 30% of the budget. Your evergreen prospecting should have 20%, and evergreen remarketing should be 10%. So the evergreen and sale here is a bit flipped, but just through it now, how we would look at the ratios. This is just a line in the sand. As Black Friday comes into, as things develop, put more into your evergreen prospecting if it's performing better, or put more into your sale prospecting if it's performing better, take things out. But a good starting point generally is to put 60% acquisition, 40% remarketing, and then of the acquisition, put most of it in the sale campaigns, and of the remarketing, put most of it in the sale campaigns as well. That's a good starting point. And you'll see here the ad groups that you'd have. You should just have your best performing audiences within both sale and prospecting. You shouldn't be testing out new audiences, really. Just take what's working in evergreen and boost it with really good creative. That's kind of the theme here. One other thing that I actually mentioned we'll touch on is, in some cases, this could be Advantage Plus campaigns, and in other cases could be manual campaigns. Manual campaigns isn't really a term, it's just what we call anything that's not Advantage Plus because of how automated Advantage Plus is. This is so dependent on the account, and I don't feel confident to make a open statement on you should have Advantage Plus campaigns, or you shouldn't have Advantage Plus campaigns, or what the split should be between them. This is something that you should be learning prior to your promotional period. And once you start your promotional period, just mimic what works for the sale campaigns. So the some accounts we have in Evergreen Prospecting manual campaign, Evergreen Advantage Plus prospecting campaign, and then just an Evergreen Marketing, and then we'll do the same for the sale campaigns. Recently, this changes so much from time to time, but recently we've been finding more success in scaling our manual campaigns over our Advantage Plus campaigns. We've just been getting better CPAs. So we'll put maybe 10-20% of the budget towards Advantage Plus campaigns and the rest towards manual. But we have one that's not absolute. We have another account, but that's kind of the inverse. It really depends on your account. I would use Advantage Plus in the scenario where you are comfortable with Facebook doing its own thing and you don't want to spend too much time and you're not so cost sensitive. But I don't think many of you are going to be here today if you don't really care about, your efficiencies and don't care as much about the account. Well, so for the creatives themselves, I think there's 3 points. We have tons of content on how to run, on how to good creative, how to run good creative tests, what to keep into account when building out your creatives, and that is applicable here. But the three key things that I would call out for Black Friday: be comfortable, creating net new ads that are really Black Friday themed and talk about it. But I wouldn't put all your eggs in that basket. I would do a couple of things. One, I would repurpose your best performers. Anything that's in the evergreen campaigns and is working well, you can then take and either put copy on top of it that makes it more Black Friday, mention a discount that really only boost the performance of the ad. And so you're starting off with a Black Friday ad that already has a decent amount of conviction behind it because you know that it works without the promotional messaging. So as a result, it's more likely to work with promotional messaging. The second option here is, if there is an important time to leverage social proof, it's during Black Friday. It's kind of a generic statement to be honest. It works for all times of the year to varying degrees, but I would explicitly mention its importance for Black Friday because, like we talked about in the beginning, there are a lot of people who are getting into the category completely new, and they want the validation of either content creators or people who create UGC or existing customers seeing their experiences with your product. I would lean a bit more heavily into that for your Black Friday creatives. And then the last thing here that's important is that the last couple of days of your sale, it's worth pushing final hours messaging. So 2 days left, last day, final days, whichever language you want to use, get it before it's gone, whatever scarcity you want to use and urgency you want to push, it's likely to do much better in the last 2 to 3 days of the sale, or however long your sale period is. We've seen this work better specifically within remarketing campaigns. So when we put like final hours messaging in your in your remarketing campaigns, it does better than in the prospecting campaigns. And that's kind of straightforward. I'd say it's because people who already have touch points with your product are more likely to be impacted by the final. But if you're getting viewed for the first time, if you're seeing it for the first time, then you don't really care that it's the last day that you'll be able to get a sale. I see one question, and have we seen good results with Advantage Plus as no targeting options? I also see that Nima's answering the question, and Nima's already answered, but I'll put just add on top exactly. It's worth a test. Some accounts it works well and some doesn't. The targeting options are probably the least of our worries. We're fine with not doing any targeting options if you have good learnings in the account. We typically think of creative as your targeting lever rather than picking audiences. And the problem though with Advantage Plus is you don't actually get any say in how your creatives are used, and you don't get as much performance in how the creative does, so you can't make creative decisions. So it's a good account to test it's a good campaign type to test to learn whether you're actually, being effective, or you could get good CPA. But you just have less control. And sometimes that's okay. If you're getting good CPA, then it's okay. All right. And then the last point that I'd put here, or sorry, the last couple of points here is in like how to determine your budget allocation throughout this period is we talk about scaling, and sometimes we don't want to scale so much the first day. We'll scale a little bit the first day, and then every couple of days we'll increase. We don't scale more than once every 2 days. I would be comfortable though, and I would encourage that as you're seeing the results come in after the first couple of days, move budgets around. Like if you're coming here and you're seeing prospecting, evergreen prospecting is doing better than sales prospecting, even though that wasn't part of your initial plan, don't question it. Learn from it later. Just put the budget into it and ride that wave, take the opportunity of it. So you're sort of becoming like a resource allocator during this period. I wouldn't, again, make changes more than once every 48 hours. Otherwise, you're going to reset it. I feel like I talk so much about resetting, and we treat Facebook with like Meta with so much sensitivity and so much carefulness. But it's because we really trust that ultimately it can optimize better than we can if we give it the right structure and the right framework in the right direction. It's our job as advertisers to like guide it, and when it's veering off track, to just set it in the right track or teach it a lesson by decreasing spend or whatever. But ultimately, it's going to be the system is going to be the thing that knows which ads go to which audience at which time to be most effective, and beyond a point that we can. And the last point here that I would point out is to just be really cautious with your optimizations. We do a lot of expectation setting with our accounts beforehand, where we try not to be so reactive. We do a lot of planning accounts where we look like at a happy day scenario. If we have our spend levels and we see our CPA is looking good, what do we do in this scenario? And then we do another scenario plan of the rainy day. If it's, our CPA is down by 20%, what are the things that we do? What should our budget look like? And then we do like a really, really bad day or really, really great day. So I would try as much as possible to plan ahead of time, set some of your expectations on things look poor, what do you need to do? And that's why we talk about like contingency plans, like having other ads that are already uploaded into the account that you could just unpause and activate. But just don't be so reactive. Give it a couple of days to get through its learnings. When you make a change, give it a couple of days before you analyze how that change is effective. I think it's really easy to want to go into an account and make changes right away, because so much else of what we do is quick and moving fast and all that. This is not a quick problem. This is a problem that needs to take time. So quick solutions don't necessarily work. If you want an update and add, just create a new ad in the system, like explicitly create a new ad in the system rather than like going to the ad and updating it, changing the copy, because then otherwise you're going to reset the learnings of that ad, and it's hard to revert and stuff, rather than pausing and unpausing. And then there are cases where you see 1 to 2 ads are getting the majority of the spend. That's not so uncommon. We would just recommend, if the performance isn't looking good, pause that ad and give other ads the chance. Just if it's getting like 80% of the budget, not good, looking good, just pause it, and then Facebook will distribute across the rest. So just be cautious here, be really intentional in decisions, and try also to think about what your decision will achieve. And if it achieves what you expect it to achieve in a couple of days, what do you do with that information? Like, are you going to do anything, or is it just a decision to increase CAC? Or if you have a hypothesis that something isn't performing well because, well, whatever reason, and you make a decision to address that, did you make a clear enough decision, or is the environment clear enough that in 2 days you will actually be able to look back and say, yes, this change resulted in this, and as a result, I now know what to do. All right, and then I'll wrap up here. But essentially, there's a cooldown period where you have an area of, you've had a period of time where you've scaled up really significantly prior to the sale period, and then you have the sale period. The sale period happens, people are converting at a different rate, behavior is really different in the account. The whole ecosystem, the whole ad environment is very different because purchasers are behaving differently during this period across a lot of other competitors, not just you. And then that ends, and everything that the system learned over the past couple of weeks, or the past few weeks, is now no longer relevant because you're not in a state of scaling. You're not in a state where you have a sale going on. Consumers aren't in a state where they're expecting sales and buying suddenly. So the system, Facebook's algorithm, has to relearn, is going to first recognize that the learnings it's built are no longer relevant. Performance is going to be poor, and it has to relearn during this period. So prior to this, we always set the expectation of the week after, you're going to get performance poorer than what you were at before you started. And you use this period to scale down as a result of this performance. So a couple of things that we'd consider. We'd consider keeping the sale as a hidden sale for 1 to 2 days. So you're no longer promoting it. You've turned off your evergreen, you've turned off your sale campaigns. Your evergreen campaigns are starting to scale down. Consider if you could keep it on the site for 1 to 2 more days, so that Facebook is now going back to a state where it's learning just about your evergreen ads again, no longer caring about your sale ads, but the people are converting in a similar fashion. And it's just a nice surprise for the people. We've seen this improve when we've done this for 1 day. We haven't tried it for 2 days yet, but we've done it for 1 day. We've seen it minimize how much worse our performance gets. Our performance still gets worse, but rather than getting 40% worse, it gets 10% worse or 15% worse. And when you're expecting this poor performance, I've talked about why you shouldn't panic and everything, just have that expectation. If performance is looking really poor for a while, we'd really you could consider pausing the evergreen campaigns, let it just calm down, let it settle, let the ecosystem settle, and then activate within a 7-day period, again. Because ultimately you also don't want to overspend, just because if you can't eat the cost, sometimes you just have to eat the cost. If you don't want to eat the cost, then you just consider pausing, and that's a fine workaround too. So yeah, that's the main parts of how we would look at the 3 periods. Just to recap, first period, warming up, you're getting the account in a state where it's ready to be in Black Friday. You do all the work up front. Black Friday period is about a good structure, which I've highlighted before, and resource allocation decisions. And then the cooldown period, I think all the cooldown period is just don't be sad. It's maybe I'm not control your feelings. You can do whatever you want, but I'm not going to be sad. Happy to open up to questions for a bit, talk through specifics.
Yeah, we got one question other than the two we already answered. One is, should you scale down the evergreen at the same rate as you scaled up? So 20% every 2 days.
Yeah, usually the inverse becomes true as well. You could be a bit more aggressive with your scaling down. So you could do like 30%, but you should still consider doing it gradually. Uh, that way, again, you're not putting Facebook in a Meta in an entirely new state. Uh, you're sort of sending it a signal along the way that this performance isn't good. We want to move it a little bit down. And usually when you move it down the first increment, your CAC will improve. And then you send it another signal even lower, and then it will try to find even cheaper auctions. So I would take that approach. A lot of the way that we talk about Meta is almost as if it's this like entity that just like it's just a feedback loop, and we send it positive signals and negative signals, and so scaling up and scaling down, when you learn how to use them as signals, they become more effective.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem of like not wanting to rock the boat, but also at the same time, like you want to stop spending as soon as possible, but you also don't want to make it such that those campaigns go into a state where after the scale down, they'll be in like a confused state and still maybe in search of new audiences or being put back into learning mode. Well, thank you so much, Kareem. We have a couple of minutes. Oh, we got one more question. We have 5 minutes. So, Kareem, the next one is assuming you have high volume audiences, that's 50,000 plus. Do you keep them in one remarketing campaign with separate ad sets or different campaigns? For example, should visitors and video viewers be in separate campaigns or same campaign, just separate ad sets?
A great question. We would put them in one campaign, separate ad sets, and use CBO, campaign budget optimization. So you just set the budget at the campaign level, and you let Facebook distribute the spend throughout. If you're fragmenting it into separate campaigns, then you're just housing the audiences are close enough that they should somewhat learn from each other. Otherwise, you're just going to be separating. You'll have to manage budgets differently, and you're giving Facebook less room to operate. The reason that we would set, maybe I'll answer like a follow-up question to that. The reason that we would put we would separate campaigns for either prospecting or remarketing. You're either optimizing for a different event. Your geos, the geographies that you're targeting behave fundamentally different, or because you want certain control over which audiences which get spent. And in this case, where it's remarketing, you basically just want the budget to go to the best performers, and you should let Meta make that decision. Do we use automation to manually adjust for the scaling up or down? We used to. We found it was more work, honestly. Like we would set up automations, but there's always like context missing. Like we'd set a rule, like if this CPA doesn't get met, then scale down by 20% or whichever amount. But there would always be something like, okay, the CPA isn't getting met, but there's this one ad that actually has a really good cost per registration, and we expect the conversions are going to come in after a couple times because that's the step right before in the funnel. Or this audience is really strong, and so would rather than scale down, we put in. So we just turned into menu, and then we'd have to undo the automation. We just started to like manually, like if you're a social manager, if you're managing the account, and especially during this period, it's worth just being in there and making the decisions with a combination of collective like aggregate data from the different points in the account, and this is maybe the least like data centric thing I'm going to say, but also follow your intuition. Like if you know how your account behaves over time with certain changes, we know that maybe scaling on a Friday isn't going to be a good thing, so we'd rather not scale, or we really should scale on Friday because weekends can look good. So we almost always stick with the manual at this point.
The answer is like feel the vibes out, basically, it sounds like.
You have the vibes.
Well, thank you so much. We have 60 seconds left. So just a reminder, we're going to follow up with the recording of this and the slides for your records, but feel free to ask us questions. Thank you. You're about to get a message from us about feedback on these webinars. We're trying to get better at this. And hopefully next time we'll have our laptops fully charged, which is, not in our to-do list yet. We'll add it in the back in the in the to-do list of the webinar prep. But thank you everyone. Thank you, Kareem. Looking forward to potentially working with folks or answering questions over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. This is really fun to present to you all. Thanks for the questions. Bye.
Bye bye.